Now I've entered into this advocacy arena, and through our state professional organization, I'm in Oregon, and we just don't have, as a profession in the United States, we don't have engagement in amongst ourselves with ourselves to then catapult into being of greater service to our communities. And at the end of the day, maybe like that bodhisattva ideal that you may have encountered just through wisdom traditions of being of service to the people around us, that engaged aspect, bringing that knowledge and that wisdom into the world is really the greatest gift.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. It was my fellow Missourian Mark Twain who said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." I'm not proud of the snarky part of me that gets a feeling of satisfaction watching people I don't admire get their comeuppance from running their sense of righteousness into a brick wall. Of course, I've got my own blind spots. Those are usually fueled by my oh-so-assured feelings that I'm right. And because these are blind spots, I don't even recognize that I'm causing myself a world of trouble. Usually I experience it as the world being unfair and uncaring about my situation, when in fact it is my outlook, attitude, and action that's turning the crank on my wheel of karma. I recently had an exchange with a student who's about to graduate and make her way into the world of practice. She's rightly excited and concerned because soon she'll be without the support of her teachers, and beyond that, there's all the learning that goes with running a business and figuring out how to practice medicine when you're on your own. On one hand, you have the freedom to do what you want, and on the other, the responsibility of figuring out how to do that. On a good day, you might say to yourself, I love that I have the opportunity to learn my entire life. And on other days, an assembly line job, that sounds pretty inviting. The thing I've found about learning is that often enough, there is some unlearning that first needs to take place. Often enough, the limits I run into are not from a system that's out to get me, but rather my own short-sightedness and my own desire to feel like I'm right and smart when in fact I'm facing a situation where I'm wrong or simply ignorant. Learning requires a kind of openness, a loosening of attitude and stance, a willingness to see how I've misunderstood something, or perhaps working out of a belief system or set of principles that I adopted without thoughtful consideration. Too often, I've encountered troubles in my business and practice because I did not know what to do, and rather than sit with that uncertainty and take inventory on what I might need to do to get better, I'd grab at a seeming solution that helped me to feel comfortable. And instead of facing the difficult realities of admitting that I was not great at communicating with others, and so I was lousy at selling what I had to offer, or I did not know how to make money, and so I decided money was a bad thing. Truth is, early on I thought sales was a slimy business because I was not great at it. And honestly, I probably more resembled the manipulative salesman than I wanted to admit at that time. And when it came to money, rather than figure out how to make the amount that I wanted, I decided the system was rigged and my noble poverty would somehow give me an edge. Turns out it didn't. Here's the thing. The troubles we face, often enough, are the curriculum for what we need to learn next. Is the world unfair and limiting you? Or is your outlook putting stumbling blocks in your own way? I've heard it said, don't ask the world to be different. Ask yourself to be better. That student I was recently talking with, she's at the beginning of the journey. Me, I'm in what I like to think of as mid-career. But in some ways, the challenge is ever the same. How to let go of what holds you back. How to recognize opportunities that don't look like previous breakthroughs. How do you humble yourself to the situations that require a change of mind and heart? And as Mark Twain reminds me, how to recognize where you think you're right, but it just ain't so. One of the first things all of us learn when we start our study of acupuncture is that there's a whole new language and way of thinking that goes with the practice. And while it verges on the poetic, it's also rigorous within its own frame. Part of where it gets tricky is when we need to communicate with our patients or other professionals. And this is where it's helpful to be, in a sense, bilingual, to have the capacity and build bridges between how we think when we're doing acupuncture and how we talk about that with everyday people. One thing I found for sure, trying to teach a little Chinese medicine 101, it usually doesn't go well. Not only are others not that interested, but it creates a barrier when we can't explain ourselves in the lingo of everyday life or within the framework of accepted medical terminology. There are some real challenges here, and John Rybak, the guest of this conversation, has some thoughts about it. We'll get into this in a moment. Don't touch that dial. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AcuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear-Don't-Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AccuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AccuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
John Rybak, welcome to Chillogical.
Thank you, Michael. It's awesome to be here.
I'm delighted that you're here. Always fun to talk with different people, different aspects of the medicine. It's, man, what a multi-tentacled creature acupuncture is.
Honestly, I mean, it's just really hard to wrap your head around. And at the end of the day, communicating that to just our patients and the world out there is just one of those most powerful things that we can refine in our practice and in reaching the people around us.
Well, it helps to speak a language people understand.
Yeah.
And so often we got this language we often talk about, it's got a royal court of characters. Nobody talks that way these days.
Oh, I love the symbolism. I mean, I spent decades just kind of in this scholarly snobbery of I wouldn't read anything other than 500 to 1,000 years old. But as I went forward, it just really realized that we're the only people that speak like that. And it's great to speak to our colleagues, but to reach outward and communicate that the profound nature of this nonlinear tentacles, if you will, of our medicine, we have so much to offer. And if we could just get that message out, I think we could be at the crest of a transformative wave in medicine today.
We talk about that among ourselves all the time, that we have this amazing kind of medicine. It's holistic, it's got history, it's relevant in the present moment, it uses the body's own natural resources. I mean, among ourselves, we talk a good game, and it feels good being connected to something that, well, it's got some gravity and some depth. And at the same time, communicating that outward into the community, or just talking to our patients, or good Lord, if you're just getting a practice going and trying to describe what you do in a world of pharmaceutical and evidence-based and whatever else is out there, functional medicine, who knows, all kinds of stuff, it gets tricky.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, we spend so many years and so many thousands of hours in school learning this very effective organizational system that uses a 3,000-year-old linguistic model. And the language that we speak isn't even used in modern day China. The poetry can actually deter from the actual science of it through the refined nature of the literary history and bringing that out to people. I mean, I came to this by accident, and there's a Zen saying that says, let go or be dragged. And have you heard that one? It's fabulous. I love it. It just,
I have not heard it, but trust me, I have experience.
I know. Isn't that the truth? Haven't we all? So in the late 80s, I grew up doing what thought I was supposed to do. And I played football. I went through high school playing football. And it was before concussions were a thing. And, it's like, hit your head. That's a good idea. Now, shake it off, boy. And so I played those sports with vigor and effort. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't good, but I was a good participant.
But you liked it. You enjoyed it, right?
Yeah, it was a hoot until it wasn't. And I spent more time in doctors' offices, chiropractors, physical therapists, and I took 1,200 milligrams of ibuprofen every day for about 7 years.
Oh my goodness! Do you still have kidneys?
Yeah, no, for real. It's part of my journey here has been not just to learn the medicine, to share it, but also to repair the damage done. But I was also a pleasantly nerdy boy, and I started publishing when I was about 15, and in scientific journals. And when I finally got to university, yeah, I had a really unique pathway that I'm really grateful for.
What were you publishing in scientific journals at the age of 15? That's pretty damn geeky. For a football guy, you're a little geeky.
Yeah, that's why I say I wasn't a football guy. But keep in mind, I went to school with, I graduated 28 people. I'm from Chicago originally and ended up in a rural town in Western Colorado. And so like where men are men and, mountains are tall. It's that sort of a thing.
Yeah. What kind of sports did you play?
Everything, because you could be varsity when you have 12 other guys on the sport. It's like I said, I wasn't good. I had something, I got to do something. But speeding that along is, I was also surrounded by beautiful nature, and I would read these field guides and read about all the animals in nature. And I knew the wildlife officer that worked in the town, and I would end up speaking to him and going, "Hey, look, these books are wrong." And after a while, he started getting pleasantly irritated with me. He's like, "Write a letter to this professor at the University of Colorado and get off my back, kid." And I did. And they sent back and they said, "Write it in this format, do this, that, and the other thing." And I started doing that. And that's how that ball got rolling.
You were correcting errors in the world of wildlife
Biology. Yeah.
That's badass.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't get that too often, but I appreciate it. So at any rate, as a kid, I thought, well, scientific methodology, this is me. I'm identifying like that. So I ended up in this really tight-knit Cartesian reductionist methodology that I thought was supposed to be the way of the world. At the same time, like I said, I'm hurting. Like I can't play basketball without electrical shocks shooting up my head. And this is me like playing high school. And now end up in college and the ball keeps rolling academically and I'm publishing more. Some professors take me in and I'm just built up this science. I have to be the Mr. Science guy. And my mom contacts me and she's like, "Boy, you're in pain. You're crabby, your digestion's a mess." And she says, "I read in the Sunday newspaper insert, there's this thing called acupuncture." Mind you, this is 1997 at this point of the conversation. So I've been on this journey for about 10 years. And I end up trying acupuncture. Fortunately, we had an insurance plan that actually covered it. And I looked up a guy and kind of closed my eyes and pointed and went. And those acupuncture treatments were absolutely transformative. And I walked out of there completely in awe, realizing that my job as a scientist is to ask better questions, not know answers. And
Oh my God, isn't that true? That is, really good science. I think really good scientists, true scientists, more interested in the question than in the answer. You get a yes or a no, it's like, okay, cool. You don't care if it's a yes or a no. You just want to know, right? That's real science.
yeah, it's the perpetual discovery. Yeah, exactly. And I really feel that we've lost that because honestly, Michael, I would go back I was working in a lab and I was doing like I was at the interface of physiology and behavior and ecology. So we ended up in a systems it was
Wait, now where were you doing this work? That is,
I was out of the biology department and the psychology department at the University of Colorado. I was working with actually the gentleman who was probably my biggest hero and champion was Hobart M. Smith. And he happens to hold the record, at least he did in the 90s, as being the most published human being in history. So he has more publications than anybody in number. And it's based upon taxonomists argue through publication. And so they're like, "No, I counted 10 scales on that lizard. No, I counted 15." And then they go back and forth. But at any rate, Dr. Smith was a beloved person in my life, and he really transformed a lot of aspects. But when I went back and I told him and my other professors this acupuncture thing, and they all were like waving me off. They're like, "No, no, 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 no. You're such a smart boy. Don't. That's suicide. That's professional suicide."
instead of, oh, I wonder how that works. Because look, you're at the cutting edge here of biology, the environment, and what was it, neurology or psychology? What was it you said? There were three things.
Physiology. So we're like looking at the structure of the animal.
Right. So, that in a way, now, doesn't that really rhyme with Chinese medicine when you think about it?
Exactly. Really. I mean, the glory of the systems that we work in are masked by the language that we speak. We understand it, but we're beholden to share that, in my opinion. And if you look at the policy and reimbursement rates and utilization rates of how Americans use acupuncture, it's really indicative that we're not we're not getting the car out of the garage here, or the bike, if you will. We're not getting out on the street and taking the show on the road. And since then, now this journey, that was 1997. We got a couple decades. I have a couple decades under my belt, and 10 of those were spent on the road, traveling, like finding excuses to be in China to study with lineage holders of wisdom traditions, as well as medicine, Tibet, India, Japan. And I just reveled in the beauty of it, but we're not getting it out onto the street. And I came back to find that to the US, that is.
Now, how long were you gone?
I spent about a cumulative. I probably put together about 7 years overseas. I would just piece it together through study abroad programs, working, traveling, chasing meditation teachers, yoga teachers, acupuncturist.
It's quite a walkabout.
It was overdone. Don't try this at home, kids.
But wait a minute. Hang on just 1 second. Why not try it at home? I mean, why not take yourself off the deep end and see what's there?
Genuinely. I mean, I think I'm being jokingly saying that. I would say that I could have moderated a little bit more, and I think I wouldn't be pushing 50 having this conversation. I think I would have been able to bring that out a little bit further if I just refined those journeys a little bit. But I think it really, you're like, to your point, that expansive exploration has provided a framework for me to understand not only our medicine, but how to bring it back to people like my family that otherwise would never try, or still haven't, if you will, tried acupuncture as a medical option.
And here's something else. I just want to put a little tick mark in. Why not go off the beaten path? I mean, like way off the beaten path. Because if you don't take a deep dive, oh, yeah, I went for a few weeks here or there. I mean, look, there's a difference between a vacation and a journey.
Yeah, true words.
And it sounds like you took kind of a walkabout. A walkabout is not just, oh, I'm adding some things onto my resume. A walkabout is letting go of your damn resume, seeing what else is out there.
Well, I certainly did that.
Yeah. So I think, look, not everybody does it, and it's not for everyone. But if you're built for that kind of thing, you're like a Lewis and Clark kind of guy. You're like a Shackleton kind of guy.
I'm flattered, to be honest. I mean, that I would never stop to think of it in that perspective. It was fun. And
damn right, learning is great. Learning is always fun.
Yeah. And it was the most unreal type of learning.
You set the agenda too.
Exactly. You walk to a bus station and go, I think that's where I'm supposed to go today. Maybe slightly too little structure, but yeah. But when we come back, and it's like coming back with treasure, and then realizing nobody's really interested in even hearing about it. And when I see that we have and then I've come back, and then I've entered into this advocacy arena. And through our state professional organization, I'm in Oregon, and we just don't have, as a profession in the United States, we don't have engagement amongst ourselves, with ourselves, to then catapult into being of greater service to our communities. And at the end of the day, maybe like that bodhisattva ideal that you may have encountered just through wisdom traditions, of being of service to the people around us, that engaged aspect, bringing that knowledge and that wisdom into the world, is really the greatest gift, rather than hiding out in a cave, which maybe that's what I did for 7 years. But that's really what inspires me. And that's kind of where I'm at today, of how can we share this more in a way that it lands in the minds and the hearts of policymakers and doctors and other medical providers, so that we can help more people. Because right now we're not. As a profession, we're only helping 8 to 10% of the population.
I love the way you draw a very wide frame in terms of how we can be of service. And we're going to get into that here in a second. But I just heard you say something about how we are, as acupuncturists, with each other and how we communicate or not with each other. And before we get into the outer wide world, tell me more about your perspective on how we are with each other, where we're missing the boat, and where there's opportunities that maybe we don't see, but you notice that there's some connections that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to praise those of us that have gone out and thought outside of the box, and the bravery and fascination and whatever has inspired us to take this path, because it's not an easy one. And in doing so, we tend to be lone wolves is one way. I mean, I'm also on faculty at the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, and I work with students, and we're not working together. As soon as we graduate, we kind of like shoot out. And I think we lost sight of the fact that we're stronger together. And just not only that, you can measure that. For instance, our state professional association, the Oregon Association of Acupuncturists, we only have like 12% membership of all the acupuncturists in the state of Oregon. And we have 4,000 of, I'm going to botch that number if I try to quote how many licensed acupuncturists there are in Oregon.
Let's put it this way. You got a lot of damn acupuncturists out there.
There's a lot of us out there, and we're not supporting ourselves. We're not supporting the systems that help support ourselves and our communities in turn by messaging. We only have about 10 to 15% engagement amongst ourselves, and we can't do much. I mean, it's a constant conversation on board meetings of membership so low. And honestly, I mean, from school all the way through being in practice for 12 years, we tend to be a little bit exclusive amongst each other by our modalities, when really our best friends are ourselves.
First of all, thank you for bringing this up. I think there's an open secret that we don't talk about much. And that open secret is, when it comes to people throwing shade on acupuncturists, no one does it better than other acupuncturists.
True. Yeah. That's right. And it's distressing.
It is distressing. And I don't know why. I don't know why we're like this. I watched myself do it.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I think, if you will, I mean, I would digress, but something that's really clear amongst our profession is what I come to call financial trauma. I mean, our reimbursement rates are really low. We have to hustle so hard. Most of us are in private practice. You got to learn so many business systems just to understand it. And honestly, I think the numbers that I read are slightly outdated. It might be about 8 or 10 years old, that within 3 years, the attrition rate of our profession is somewhere in the likes of like 60 to 70%, at least of complete disengagement from using their education, a 6-figure education, to provide a service to the world, or just being underemployed and going back and waiting tables or building web pages or whatever their profession may have been. So to be honest, I think part of it is a financial trauma, and we actually see each other as, in bringing back some of that behavioral ecology of my younger years, we see each other as competition.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Well, okay, so a piece of that is true. A piece of it is true. If someone's seeing the woman down the street, they're not seeing me. And if I don't have enough people in my practice to keep me floated, sure, I'm going to see them as competition. So, that's a piece of it. I love your perspective on ecosystems. You hear about nature red in tooth and claw, and it's all about competition. Some of it's about competition, for sure. And there's all these other places in nature where it's like wildly cooperative.
Yes, we lose sight of that. And so is the biology and our medicine for that matter. I mean, we've almost forgotten some of the inherent lessons of what our medicine represents. I had an opportunity to give a speech to our graduating class, and the dean of the school was sitting behind me, and she kind of laughed at me because I was stomping my feet. And I called out to the auditorium. I was like, there will never be a shortage of people that we can be of service to. There will never be a shortage of people that we can help. So stop fighting amongst yourselves. And in doing so, honestly, if you look at some of the evidence-based research, it corroborates that statement. But at the same time, I'm on the mailing list for several different medical franchises, and most of them are physical therapists. And I get notices. They're like, we're opening 6 more physical therapist clinics this month in the city here. And to be honest, and then I drive down the road, and I, at this stage, I've focused on business and renting places, and I can see like that spot is probably $5,000 to $6,000, $5,000 to $8,000 per month. And there's a new PT clinic going there, and there's one going in there. And physical therapy is an essential healthcare modality, but I'm using it as an opportunity to say, well, we don't need to be antagonistic or against our colleagues and peers. What we really need to be doing is communicating outward, because honestly, there should be a greater equilibrium in that expansion of services and access to care for our communities. And at the end of the day, it comes down to communication. Our physicians refer to PTs because PTs speak their language. We could work in tandem. Patient outcomes and quality of life are shown to improve dramatically when we work on the multiple physiologic systems that acupuncture in conjunction with other physical and pharmacologic methods hold. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we could go to the kidneys and what the kidneys represent for what's going on amongst ourselves. Maybe a little bit of liver in there too, but it seems like we're maybe a little bit fearful, and we're misappropriating resources and not understanding that some of the greatest investment we can have is in that small membership fee and staying together, whether it's stepping up and speaking out and writing or whatever, but just being present in the simple things. It's 1 patient or 2 patients per month or per year. So just keeping it together and making sure our anger or frustrations directed properly, liver, and that we're rooted and not letting fear overcome us.
I think about, and you'll see this in so many developmental models, right? You can see it in Piaget, you can see it in Erik Erikson, you can see it in Abraham Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs. There's certain things at the base. Doesn't matter what developmental model you're talking about. We can talk about Chinese medicine, kidneys, right? There's your base. You get the stuff handled at the base. You get your fear covered. You make sure that you're eating. You got a place to live. You gain certain social skills. You manage to handle your own neuroses and anxiety. You get that ground foundational stuff covered. Other stuff, then you're ready for the next thing. But until you cover your bases down low, so to speak, root that kidney chi, it's hard to flourish at the other levels.
I mean, that is the Taoist origin, is the water that begets the fire. And I love the symbology. In my insistence upon us learning another language of science, there's by no means is what I imply that we should abandon the shibboleth, if you will, of our language, of our specialized language that we have amongst ourselves that's so immensely effective. But yeah, that Maslow hierarchy is we got the cart in front of the horse. To be honest, we're hustling forward without actually getting rooted in our community and ourselves, and using the systems and modeling, not reinventing the wheel. Because when we go to DC and we're going to legislate on a federal level, we show up with 100 people, and we'll use physical therapists as another example. Again, they'll come up with 5 to 10,000 PTs, and they just scatter and meet every single legislator on the Capitol Hill. Whereas we come in with just a ragtag team of very dedicated, heartful people, but it's a numbers game.
Okay. One of the things that you've alluded to several times in this conversation is language and how we use language. And our language of Chinese medicine, beautiful and poetic and clinically useful as well, may I say. Wonderful as we're doing our work, but out in that bigger world where they don't speak our language, it's up to us to learn to speak their language. How can we fit what we know and what we offer into that Western paradigm that I just heard you talking about? And I think you used the word scientific in there as well. And look, a lot of us are kind of anti-scientific in our trade. So it's kind of like, well, I'm interested in holism, not that Cartesian bullshit.
First off, on the Cartesian bullshit, like if you just go back historically, Cartesian logic was a stepping stone to where we're going now. And now you're starting to enter into a realm, like it had to be black and white. It's computer programming, on or off, and it simplifies it.
Oh, you mean like yin and yang?
Yes, exactly. Love it. Thank you for bringing that on home. But then we know, like if you just read the Tao, I mean, one begets two, and two begets three, and three begets innumerable things. I think is the opening is verse 1. Similarly, we're still like, we haven't really cycled out into what is now being described in that scientific, like the cutting edge of that science. Now you're hearing it more and more articulated as systems theory, systems biology. And I just found this great book, and it was subtitled The Coming Age of Quantum Biology. And so where an example that I'll bring this back into how we can be of greater service and really make that that hierarchy of needs satisfied is by working together and communicating. So a lot of things that I've seen. So now that I've entered into more of a legislative environment and looking at what's holding us back, and you look at the hot topic sometimes is going to be dry needling. And to be honest, more acupuncture out, in my personal opinion, the more acupuncture that's out there, the better. But we're not handling the narrative at all well. I mean, I know I like, and there's a part of me that's like, oh, nobody should ever be able to do this. And I have a strong feeling about that also. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're holding our scope of practice, but we're not. And right now in the US, 35 states have legislated and created law to allow other medical providers to perform dry needling. And dry needling, if you're an acupuncturist, is a hot topic. And we know that this is a subset, an essential subset of what otherwise our education consists of. And the point I really want to make, and I want everybody to really remember this one thing, is that all those legislative decisions, and I've watched them from Maryland, that gave dry needling to athletic trainers. I mean, they're lowering the bar more and more, and patients are getting subpar medical treatments potentially. But the thing is that everybody needs to realize that without fail, every single one of those rulings that had to go through the House of Representatives of the state, through the Senate of the state, and through the executive branch of the state, through their governors, to be signed into law and give our scope of practice away, each one of those rulings said one thing that we all should remember, is that acupuncture, they will say acupuncture is a belief system.
What?
That's it. Because we're not communicating, they think we're a religion.
Wait, they said acupuncture is a belief system.
They've differentiated dry needling. They've taken us legally in a legal argument. They've taken acupuncture And the precedent is really strong because, like I said, 35 states have given our scope of practice away to the likes of more chiropractors, more PTs, and athletic trainers. Now, I'm not anti this. Like I said, we just need to raise the bar of education. But the thing is that because of our communication style, and when I see the literature that's being sent and the lobbying that's being used to these legislators who are making the decision, they are making the decisions based upon acupuncture. They understand acupuncture to not be an evidence-based scientific modality that has any bearing in modern medicine. They refer to us as a belief system.
So that is a look, I got to hand it to the other side then. All right, I'm going to hand it to Team B for being able to frame it in that way. Not helpful for us, helpful for them, and kind of brilliant. So, okay, good job. Too bad it's Team B, not us. A couple questions. One, what do we do about that? Number two, isn't there all kinds of evidence-based research out there that is demonstrative? We're not just a belief system. We're not just a bunch of wackos talking about emperors and ministers of granaries and things like that. We actually have a science, and we could. I mean, that stuff is out there, isn't it? How come it's not being utilized? What's going on here? I'm a little confused.
Therein lies the rub, isn't it? That's the essence of the argument. And unfortunately, first off, we have 50 years of research that has demonstrated multiple nonlinear mechanisms of action. Again, going back to the tentacles that we began with, that nonlinear nature of what biology and life represents. We are interacting with it on multiple systems. And I just published an article in the Oregon Medical Board report. And this report goes out to every single physician and medical provider that's licensed through the Oregon Medical Board. And it's all about the science. And I'm just trying to bring it in. And whether I'm teaching or speaking with board members and colleagues here in Oregon, the whole purpose of what I'm emphasizing and I'm going to give it up to my students. I was worried that I get a lot of kickback because I remember when I was in school, everybody's like, no, stop the science. We can't do this. It's Cartesian bullshit. And it is. Reductionism isn't the way, but science is starting to figure that out for itself.
Well, I want to say one thing about reductionism here. It's got its place. Okay? It has its place. Look, all things have their place. In Chinese we'd say their fan wei, right? Their scope, where it's useful. And we're often very down on Cartesianism. But look, your basic Newtonian physics makes the damn world work. Now I get it, there's a quantum thing going on out there, but good luck making your practice better with that. Right? String theory, like, okay, fine. But I'm worried about my car not starting. So I think it's really important to remember that there's absolutely a place for Mr. Descartes. And the other thing that I think is important, and this really homes back to Chinese medicine, in my opinion, one of the great thinking tools of all time is Chinese medicine. Another great thinking tool of all time is the scientific method that came out of the European Enlightenment. Like, how do you know what the hell reality is? How do you separate opinion from, or belief for that matter, even more so? How do you separate belief from what's actually going on? Well, I'm going to look around and see what's happening. I'm going to observe. I'm going to come up with an idea. Let's call it a hypothesis. I'm going to test that out. I'm going to test it out to find out yes or no, because like I was saying earlier, could scientists want to know yes or no? And man, we use that scientific method all the time in clinic. We call it a diagnosis, but it's really a hypothesis. How do you test it? You test it with the treatment. So, I get it, and I've been there too. Oh yeah, reductionism bad, holism good. It's like an herb. Dongui is a good herb, right? Well, for a certain person at a certain time. I've said this before on the podcast. I'm going to say it again just because it's true. When I was a kid, I had shop class, 8th grade. I love shop class. Mr. Bicel, our teacher, one of the great Taoist masters in my life. He'd always say this. He'd always say, right tool for the right job, boys. Like, don't use a screwdriver as a chisel and don't use that wrench as a hammer. Boneheads. Like, right tool for the right job. And okay, so I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I just, I just want to put a shout out to the scientific method, which has made, I think, all of our lives immeasurably better because we have refrigeration and food in it.
Well, you were interviewing Eric Karchmer a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
That was a great interview.
Well, he's brilliant. The trick with a great interview is you get good people on and you ask them a few questions and you shut up.
He was going and he was relaying something about his experience when he drifted from his anthropologic studies and his thesis and then he ended up in medical school in Beijing. And one of the things that you both were relating to on that one, and I think really encapsulates what we're getting at, is he described the discontent that he was experiencing with himself and his other Western classmates were getting frustrated with the amount of Western biology, and it came to a head. And somehow in that story, it was relayed that one of the instructors said, wouldn't it be better if you could learn 2 languages instead of just 1? Isn't the world better that way? And I was like, bang, that's it. Isn't it better if we could speak 2 languages than just 1? We'd be so much more effective and helpful.
Yes. So tell me more about 2 languages and being able to better communicate the, as you put it, multi-physiological systems approach that is Chinese medicine.
Yeah. If you just go through the laundry list of how we interact with the body, you can break it down into 3 general categories. I don't know, perhaps you'll put that article linked into the bio or on there, and people can jump in on it. Because I wrote this article for Cliff Notes, not just for physicians, but for our colleagues, that you can just quick pull it up and you have a laundry list. And there's 3 categories that we want to make sure that people understand and we can embody in ourselves in how we work in a very reductionist perspective, but also that multiverse, if you will, of interactions that we have with the body. And you have, firstly, connective tissue theory. We're changing how the connective tissue is working on several different aspects. Secondly, we have a neuroendocrine or biochemical interaction with the body. And there's a laundry list of changes that are measured, from the beloved increase of oxytocin, because we all know the AccuZone. That's what brings people back. They're like, not only did I feel good, my pain went away, I was blissed out. Is a very common, not exclusive, but a very common experience. And then lastly, the neurological impact that we have. And this is measured in the central nervous system. This is measured in the peripheral nervous system. fMRI studies show that areas that are known to be triggered and during stress events and pain events downregulate. And a lot of these studies were done on animals. But a lot of these studies some of them are actually clinical also. But not only that, is you downregulate the areas that you don't want active, you upregulate the areas that we do want active. And that ability to choose, to be honest, that frontal lobe that we have as humans is a unique feature in the biological world, the ability to choose. And we can choose fear, and that is a choice. And typically animals don't have the options there, but we do. And we can choose to take it upon ourselves for activities that are increasing of our consciousness and increasing and interacting with our communities, because community engagement is a higher process. But you have to get those fundamental needs, as Maslow style needs, satisfied. But yeah, so when we're talking about these things, we could go into like the antioxidant effects, the anti-inflammatory. But what the really beautiful thing, if you look forward thinking, it's my strong opinion that acupuncture, if we take control of the narrative, if we really emphasize this non-linear physiologic interaction, what we do in our simple act of taking surgical, sterilized steel and putting it into an electroconductive tissue, we will, and getting this multitude of physiologic actions, there's no doubt in my mind that if we play our cards right and communicate well to the right people, we will have a profound impact on the future of medicine and how biology is perceived. And not only that, in biotechnology and how we can actually build upon the fundamentals of what we use through our organizational system and through our just the tools, making sure we're going to shop class and using the right tools and matching those up.
Thank you for the shout out to shop class. Taking control of the narrative. I want to hone in on this a little bit more here in a moment. You just said something that is so poetic and it's so geeky and sciencey at the same time. I just love it. Taking sterile surgical steel, placing it into an electroconductive tissue. I mean, yeah, it's true. It's a love, again, it's very poetic. It's totally science and geeky. I can see how that would land with so many people in the, I'm just going to call it conventional world. And let's not throw any shade on the conventional world. Okay. We so often do, oh, the conventional world, oh, those mainstream people, let's just leave that to the side. Because look, we're here to serve and help people. And if most of them are in the mainstream, better if we can cozy up and help them out, right? Isn't that what a bodhisattva does? You try to appear as whatever influence a person needs to have in their life, right? It's our job to shape shift to our patients, not ask them to shape shift to us, I think is what it comes down to. At any rate, and again, I promise you, we're going to come back to talking about this is part of taking control of the narrative. So this lovely thing, sterile surgical steel into an electroconductive tissue, I could see that being grabbed by the PTs, by the physical therapists, by the trainers, by the chiropractors, all the people that we're afraid of right now. What happens if we put that language out and they go, yep, that's what we're doing? How do we handle that?
Ooh, you mean so further loss of our narrative and giving them our big game and showing our cards, if you will. Therein lies the risk. I mean, we're going to have to just lean into the scenario, but in doing so, we're going to have to flex a little bit. We're going to have to go to the cognitive gym, the communication gym. We're going to have to work together so that our our organizations of advocacy have the capacity to work PR, and we are showing up in mass. Because if we don't, like, to be honest, we could sit and hide in our caves. Like I said, I lived in a cave. I literally lived in effectively caves for months at a time during that journey. It didn't do anybody any good. Maybe it did me some good that I know some yogic breathing. It's great, but we got to get it out.
Well, hang on a second. Before you get too far down that road, you went and lived in caves for a while. It gave you something. It changed you in some way. That look at the work you're doing now. Could you be doing the work you're doing now if you hadn't sat in that cave for a bit?
Sometimes I wonder. I mean, I've considered that from the converse of, dang, it would have been nice to get this show on the road a little bit earlier, but maybe the age wasn't right for it. So inevitably, in all of our paths, it's perfect, and that's the inherent perfection of our journey. And I think in using that as leverage point of, what if we give all of our cards away to other professions who want to do what we do? I think we should. We should be playing our hand openly and building greater bridges. And that's the name of my clinic, is the Wellbridge Clinic, because really we need to be building bridges. And I really think we should be playing an open hand here. And in doing so, stepping up, and in doing so, empowering our advocacy organizations and brushing up. I mean, I wrote that article and it's 900 words. It's probably some of the densest 900 words I ever wrote. And it will take any of our listeners here to go through it and get a couple sound bites and click in, because all the references and citations are in there hot linked, and you can print those out or contact me, because I did notice one in connective tissues wasn't active. But we're going to have to step up, or not. I mean, and that's fine, but we can't complain if we don't take a moment to become engaged in the world and sharing. And when I watch our membership committees for our state organization working, it's such a heartbreaker, Michael. It's such a heartbreaker when you have such a minority of our profession jumping in there. When you know, and we all know in our heart of hearts, how powerful this medicine is. And so here we are, is like, I would say open it, make sure we're communicating well, making sure that if we're going to give our scope of practice away, we should do it on our terms, which is speaking the language, which would also be, because safety was not addressed in some of those rulings that I read, that you can get a dry needling certification online in 54 hours. If that doesn't make some people's feel slightly volcanic, I don't know what does.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Certainly, the safety issue is worrisome. This may sound cold on my part, but I'm going to say it anyway. That kind of thing is self-correcting over time. I'm sorry that some people will be injured, but that kind of thing is self-correcting over time. You get enough complaints of pneumothorax or nerve damage or whatever, and in time that self-corrects.
I will say,
I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying things that are effective tend to be effective in time, unless the system is very corrupt. Negative feedback tends to change and help the system. Yeah, I mean, anytime you get humans involved, it's going to get a little corrupt.
We do have some counteracting organizations, like I think it's Association for Safety and Acupuncture, but to be honest, that self-correction, people are getting gaslighted, because we kind of live in the age of gaslighting, if whoever controls the narrative, and I'm going to say it again, narrative is crucial here, will manage that self-correction or not. And what comes to mind here is that when there's a needle, a dry needling or an acupuncture incident, if you look into the research and the safety, PTs do dry needling until they hit the lungs and there's a pneumothorax, and then it gets categorized as an acupuncture injury and it gets attributed to us.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? How is it that someone who doesn't have an acupuncture license is creating an acupuncture injury? I don't understand how that works.
Well, somebody that has the license and the scope of practice to do dry needling in this particular example, the reporting, because like medical incidents have their own code. We use diagnostic codes all the time. So a diagnostic code for the type of pneumothorax, my understanding of it is, and I've heard it more in I haven't heard it like in this detail, but just looking into how medical diagnoses are attributed, the attribution is to acupuncture, while the patient that experienced the event was is commonly, and the percentages are out there, and I'm afraid I have to dig through my citations because I save everything at this point. Every time I say something big, I make sure that there's something out there that I've saved that I can link back to. But the like a PT or a chiropractor that is trained in dry needling may cause a pneumothorax, but when the medical diagnosis is attributed and then it goes out into the statistics that represent safety, it's attributed to acupuncture as a general theme. So we don't have enough refined control. What I'm saying is we don't have enough refined control over our narrative to make sure that, yes, okay, if you have the scope of practice in Maryland or Washington State or any other state for that matter, to perform dry needling, that needs to be another medical modality, which it has its underbelly, and we don't necessarily want that. But when we're talking about from a safety attribution, we need to be careful because we're not seeing the game all the way through. We're not thinking the system all the way through. It's like playing a good game of chess. The more I spent in our state capital, I'm just watching how this is getting played out, and we're getting outplayed because we're not seeing the entire board. And these are only a couple of components, but unfortunately, that one tiny minutia, because pneumothorax are rare, tragic, don't want them on the grander scheme of medical safety issues. We are probably, I think we are one of the safest medical modalities out there, but we're not managing how those rules and legalities, legal matters, and diagnostic criteria are then attributed. So it's a bowl full of noodles here. I mean, it's like we kind of opened a can of worms.
It is a bowl full of noodles. Yeah, well, thank you, and it helps me with my thinking because my thinking was, yeah, if someone who's not an acupuncturist causes a pneumothorax, those will add up over time. But if the system is actually counting them against us, not them, oh, huh, I didn't know that. Well, that's different. Didn't expect it. I want to bring in another piece here because, look, I think like many acupuncturists, I've had patients that got some dry needling. Mostly they didn't like it. It's not very comfortable. And they're back in my office because for as popular as it is, I'm not sure how effective it is. Or maybe it's just that only the people that it didn't work for landed in my office, which might be the case. I don't know what the success rate is because I just don't. I haven't investigated that. So I'll just leave that to the side. But I'll say this. People come in, and at times I have met people who've been injured by their dry needling. None of these people would consider reporting it as an adverse reaction. I mean, I'm apoplectic over it. It's like, oh my God, look what they did. You know, I've learned to not do that, by the way. But at first, it was like, oh my God, did you report that? And they're like, well, I like my person. I don't want to get them in trouble. They're trying to help me. So there's something else that I think it would help us to remember. People want to like their medical practitioners. They want to feel like they've got a relationship. And if somebody, even if they haven't helped you, has demonstrated caring towards you, it's highly unlikely that that person's going to get reported. And I'll go even further because here's a mistake that I made, and I don't make the mistake anymore. But I used to make the mistake of trying to educate them about how they've been injured. Guess what happened? They usually don't come back and see me because I was just throwing shade on somebody that they care about because they cared about them. I think we need to learn, we need to address it somehow, but this like head to head, I'm going to educate you about how you've been hurt. I think it really works against us. Have you got any thoughts on how to navigate that one?
You know, it just goes back to that solidarity amongst acupuncturists and not throwing each other under the bus. One of the most important things that I think you're highlighting here and just really want to emphasize is we need to work as a team with all our patients' medical providers. We are a part of their safety net and a part of their care. And the need to have confidence in all people to work together is one of the most important things I think any person on their health journey can have, is to know that there's congruence, and if not congruence, then communication. And it's like raising, maybe I don't want to be pedantic, but raising a child is like there's certain conversations you have as parents in front of your kiddos, and then there's some that you don't. And and I just can't. Yeah, it's such an important point as you bring up here of how we communicate with our patients and making sure. And to be honest, I wouldn't even push back into, say, the don't reach out to that dry needling practitioner, and call them out. That is, you got to. I think we're really going to have to emphasize a positive angle and making sure we're communicating in a forward thinking, solution oriented, with a voice of positivity, because it's so easy to go negative. It's so easy to become frustrated, especially when, to be honest, we're really undervalued, like massively undervalued, and frighteningly underutilized. So it's easy to be like, look what I can do, and we're not getting credit for it.
Okay, so you just put your finger on something. I think this is really important. We can do it. I got a question. Can we? Do we? To me, I think the thing that bespeaks the most about acupuncture is that it's helpful to people. And I mean, I've been there myself where I'm actually not getting the greatest of results with somebody. And maybe that dry needler didn't either, but you know what? Maybe I'm not doing much better. And so for myself, I am constantly asking, how can I, with all my education, because look, patients don't care about what education I have. They could care less. What they care about is, was I able to help them? Am I actually able to do a better job? I think is a super important thing that I ask myself all the time. Because, John, I got to tell you, there are days I come up and it's like, man, I am coming up short. I should be able to do better than this, and I'm not.
Gosh, that's oh, you hit on a great point here, Michael. I don't know, you probably had that feeling, and all of us that are here, we have an affinity. We have affinity to mystery, myth, and magic. There's always going to be whether you can be any kind of a denier of it, but we're going to, as a demographic, as a general group of people, we're going to err on that slight emphasis, if not a lot more. And that's a beautiful thing. And some of the most important science, until it's described, is perceived as magic. Now, here's where it can get a little tricky, and I think is what I'm hearing you say, and at least in the way I feel it, is that, yeah, there are days when you're like, dang, they're like, that shoulder's not getting better.
That shoulder is not getting exactly.
And at the end of the day, I think we got to give ourselves a break. Even in some of the citations in here, you'll hear the voice of science and reason that most medicine that is out there in the world today is barely, standard of care is barely better than what is otherwise acknowledged as placebo. And then if you look at, like, Andrew Vickers did a couple of meta-analyses, and he's an Oxford trained biostatistician. He's at Columbia University now, and just a big brain. He did a meta-analysis of studies that in 2012 and then again in 2018, and it spanned over 20,000 patients. And what he showed was, not only are we more effective than standard of care, which is PT, surgeries, and pharmaceuticals, but we're even fake sham acupuncture is more effective. Now,
that gets weird, doesn't it?
What's that?
That gets really weird, doesn't it? Sham acupuncture. Is there such thing as sham acupuncture? If people are getting better.
Exactly. That's a whole can of worms. I'd love to go into what that might mean.
Right? Or maybe you're doing Japanese acupuncture just using a dang teishin needle. It doesn't even pierce the skin.
I know. Like, we can get flavorful on that one, but the point I really wanted to make was that even at, like, sham acupuncture is like 50, 40% effective. Verum acupuncture, true acupuncture, which, keep in mind, only consists typically in these studies of like 4 gates, like PC6. There is rudimentary, and we're effective at 60+%. And that is remarkable in the medical world. And so this is where I want to make sure we all take a deep breath in and acknowledge that at 60%, we're still tremendously more effective in the long run with effects that persist over time and improve quality of life. At 60% efficacy, we're still more effective than standard of care, period. We're better than standard of care in these meta-analyses, and they're not small studies. So I know that feeling, but we have to take heart of going, we got to know when to refer, but we got to give ourselves a break because we're not magicians. And even magicians aren't that effective.
Well, I hear your point. I think the point I'm trying to make is that we hold ourselves accountable. And standing behind well, I've got 6 years of education, that makes me better. I don't think that carries water. What carries water is, did someone get better? And, look, if a nurse practitioner learned a little acupuncture and could get someone to not have to take proton pump inhibitors, with just a couple of needles, would we go, oh my God, they're taking over our scope of practice? Or do we go, man, that acupuncture is badass. I'm glad she's using it. Right. And when it's us who's not able to do what we say we're able to do, I mean, I get it. You don't want to go in a tailspin. Oh my God, it's all over. I'm no good. I'm going to get a job at Starbucks. We don't want to do that. But I think it's also important to hold ourselves accountable and go, even with everything I've got, I'm not getting this. Just standing behind our education, I don't think will take us forward in that world that you're talking about, of that greater outside world of conventional medicine. Us simply saying I have more education, I don't know if it would help. Does it help? I don't think it would help. But you tell me. I'm just a clinician, not an advocate.
I hear you on that one. I really don't think that throwing those numbers around are going to be. I think that again that we're kind of like dividing and conquering with that potential argument. And what it really seems to be is more of a yes and of like, okay, yeah, sure. We like a doctor of acupuncture now is coming out of school these days, has more clinical and didactic hours than a doctor of physical therapy. We can make that argument. I wouldn't linger on it because it's only one leg to stand on. And similar to our medicine, we don't go on just one sign and symptom. And so we got to bring it out and take a systems approach and bring it out honestly with some positivity, because and it can be a little hard to put a smile on your face when you're like, I only saw 5 people today. That ain't going to pay the bills. Or I didn't get that juice, because that feeling of when you're like, people get up and they're like, wow, I feel so much better. My neck's going, and if it doesn't happen, that takes some maturity for sure. But bringing it out, we're going to have to bring it with some positivity and take that systems approach. And that's the essence of our medicine. We're just going to have to take a page out of our own playbook.
Yeah. So we need to land this plane here in a moment. But on the way down, as part of landing it, I want to hear a little more about what we can do collectively in taking control of the narrative, and what we can do as individuals, just maybe moment by moment, patient by patient, cocktail party by cocktail party. Do people still have cocktail parties? They do in the Midwest. How can we help to, I'm not going to say spin the narrative, but take charge of it and promote ourselves in whatever context we happen to find ourselves? Again, collective and individual.
First of all, I mean, you're doing it. This is a perfect example of this opportunity. Granted, I'm not quite sure how broad the listenership is, but the fact that
mostly acupuncturists.
Yeah, but just the same is that this is how we do it. Is we do it with joy, and we come out and we start speaking more, and in doing so we have to expand our vocabulary. And I've watched my students go through finals just for the last couple weeks, and it brought me back of, wow, this is a lot of information. And in doing so, just to grasp this system of thinking and learning an entirely new language is daunting. And in doing so, I think it's a safety mechanism that we stay away from the evidence base. And I understand that. But we gotta, like, if you're gonna, how do you eat a whale? One bite at a time. And just use these little pieces and sharing that. And so we have to expand our vocabulary. We have to speak another vocabulary. And we've learned how to do that with our patients. And in doing so, it would behoove all of us, particularly those of us in private practice or working in collaborative environments, to communicate with our colleagues and our medical, our provider, our peers who are providers. So that would be one, is just brush up on it. And that's really what I try to do with this article here, and make it bite-sized and transmissible. So here, you can hand it off. Like, it sits out. I hand it to every patient that comes through these days. I'm like, here, bring this to your doctor. You're going to your PT, you're going to your orthopedic surgeon, bring this article. Just let them know we're for real. But honestly, I think none of that's going to make a difference at all if, as a profession, we don't find solidarity amongst ourselves. I mean, bottom line. And as an individual, one of the most important things we can do is become a member of your state association, because I think almost every state association then sends a contribution to the national association. And there's a lot of creative ideas out there, but for us to get a lot of these efforts out, whether it's even just communicating and get a PR agency or understanding our messaging better to push back on expanding scopes of practice that are sneaking into ours, it takes money, it takes time. And these are volunteers that are working their tail ends off. And a lot of them are in private practice. It's heavy. And so honestly, like, those are just a couple of the things that we could do. And I would just emphasize, becoming a member of your state association is probably, if there's one thing that everybody did today that heard this, it would be transformative. It could make the difference between another state sharing their scope of practice, for better, for worse. I'm not going to judge. Who knows how this will play out? But at the end of the day, we're doing our communities a disservice by not sticking together and communicating in a way that we can help them.
Yeah, I think one of the real challenges with this, like you said, we're very much lone wolves in a way. Acupuncturists, by and large, we're kind of non-mainstream and proud of it. Like, I'm going to let my freak flag fly. All fine and good. However, and this is where I think it gets tricky, working at those larger state and national levels, working at the higher levels where we're maybe interfacing with other medical organizations or other medical practitioners, if we've got 16 different stories about what we do, well, now we just look like disorganized idiots. If we have a cohesive and sort of inclusive narrative about what we're doing, there's a lot more power in that. The problem is that many of us will not feel like that represents us, and we want to feel like we're represented. So I don't know the answer to that. I recognize it as an issue. Look, I live in the state of Missouri, and when I first moved to St. Louis, I was contacted by one of the practitioners here, happened to be the president of the state association. First of all, welcoming me to St. Louis, like, man, we need more acupuncturists. Thank God you're here. You got here just in time. Thank you. We are underserved in St. Louis, Missouri. Thanks for coming out. But the other thing was, look, we're a small organization and we need your help. Would you like to be treasurer next year? I don't like joining organizations. But I did my time in the state organization because, you know what? For all the reasons that you just mentioned, it's important. Here's what else. Give me an education into an area of life that I'd just as soon avoid if I possibly could. In my state, because of the lack of numbers of acupuncturists, I couldn't avoid that responsibility, doing something for us, in our state organization. But look, if you're lucky enough to live in a state big enough where you don't have to put in the time, join the damn thing. Because whether you agree with what's being said or not, there's this thing about showing up in numbers that politicians pay attention to. Sometimes it's just a numbers game. Hopefully you're being smart as you play the numbers game, but sometimes it's just a numbers game. And that's all they're looking at. So it's great insurance that we'll have a profession 10 years from now. So I'm with you. Join up.
Yeah. And that's, at the end of the day, if we just realize what the essence of the goal is and whether the minutia of our expectations are being met, but rather just look at the greater theme of what we're trying to accomplish here, then we're all best buds. I mean, at the end of the day, we have so much more in common than we don't.
Well, hey, I appreciate the work that you're doing, John. I'm so glad you made some time today to sit down for this conversation. The paper that you wrote, which is brilliant, I think all y'all should read it. It'll be on the show notes page. And anything else to share with our listeners before we wind it down for today?
I just want to say thanks for all your work, Michael. It's such a fabulous way to bring us all together and just transcends space and time. And isn't that the essence, the depth and profundity of our medicine? So thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time and letting me come on here and share my enthusiasm. Hope we can do it again.
Been my pleasure. Thanks. One of the faulty ideas I had about lighting out to Taiwan to learn some Chinese was that it would help me to be better able to explain Chinese medicine in English. That turned out to be 100% incorrect. It did help me to think more clearly about Chinese medicine in Chinese, but as far as translating that into English, not so much. What can I say? Wrong again. And this is all part of the lifelong learning that we're in for when setting out to practice medicine. There's a lot that you might think to be so, but it turns out not. John's thoughts on how we need to be fluent, both in traditional ways of thinking about medicine and able to communicate that to our modern culture and the system of conventional medicine, that seems important. And if you're coming down on the side of, well, that's not fair, or conventional medicine is marginalizing us, please remember, acupuncture is unconventional. And while it increasingly is winding its way into the mainstream, it's not fair to ask the mainstream to accept us just because it's the medicine that you like to practice. Culture and institutional systems, they change slowly. Like the children of immigrants, we need to be fluent in two different worlds. You can take that as an affliction, or you can take that as an opportunity. For sure, if you want to work in the conventional world, the points that John makes in this conversation will give you a roadmap. And if you like working at the edges and margins, well, there's plenty of people that are looking for something unconventional. So let your freak flag fly. One thing for sure, practicing acupuncture, it will unendingly present you with opportunities to learn something new. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.